goes without saying that different places mean different things to different people. So how does that diversity of views lend itself to heritage sites? And how does that in turn impact national identity?
Yes, many good questions. And to find out, researchers here polled some 1,500 Singaporeans on how they felt about more than 50 heritage sites. And Senior Research Fellow at the IPS Social Lab, Natalie Pang, joins us to tell us more about this. So tell us first, though, about the impetus for this study. What was it?
I think one of the things that we were trying to address through this gap was really to understand how Singaporeans thought about different heritage sites. We've seen a lot of work done, especially in recent years, documenting and also researching different sites, but they tend to zoom in on particular sites. So we wanted to kind of have like a general public opinion survey, understanding how actually everyday Singaporeans actually ascribe meaning to different sites.
And I imagine you got really varied response from one end of the spectrum to another, depending on what site you chose. So it's quite clear that the importance of these public in conversations about the built-in heritage is an important conversation to have, right? So, but again, the opinions are from A to Z.
Yes, yes.
So why is it so important to get these opinions?
I think one of the things that the team actually also discovered while working on the analysis was really how, firstly, the different facets that people actually had in mind when they evaluated sites. So one thing is knowledge, right? To what extent do I know? How much do I know about the site? How much do I remember about the site? So one of the things that really came up very interestingly for us is just how the top sites in terms of memory were very different for respondents of different age groups. So, for the older respondents, age 49 and above, Haw Par Villa was their, most memorable site. And those in the middle age group, 28 to 48, also, it was Kallang Stadium. So I think, many in that age group probably remember the Kallang Roar, that sense of solidarity when they were in Kallang Stadium with the Kallang Roar. So, I think that's knowledge, that's memory, but also how differently people perceive aesthetics. So, and I think that kind of perception is actually very subjective as well. So, yeah, that's actually some of the things that really came out that was very interesting for us.
Yeah, so keep on with this aesthetics theme then. I mean, there are some buildings, Golden Mile Complex, People's Park Complex, Pearl Bank Apartments, that are not perhaps most aesthetically pleasing or haven't aged perhaps particularly well. How do we reconcile this with sort of wanting to preserve heritage with also, I mean, was there any agreement on the aesthetics of some of these buildings? I mean, you said that some views were quite diverse. Were they quite consistent with this? Yeah,
so compared, I mean, we asked survey respondents to rate each site, right, relative to each other. So the modernist buildings you mentioned, right, which are very much actually post-independence, modernist buildings, they were not rated as highly, by people in our survey. But I think that's really reflective of, how important it is to also educate the public about the importance of these landmarks and buildings that are so symbolic of our post-independence.
Does that give them more chance to be preserved then?
Yeah.
Well, I was curious because we talked about aesthetics, but not everything is a building. Some are just sites, like the Botanic Gardens, and MacRitchie, Reservoir, or a symbol like a Malayan. Did they lose out in any way?
In fact, Malayan actually featured very prominently, across age group on all four dimensions of knowledge, memories, aesthetics, and importance. So I think this also kind of is reflective of how, over the years, icons and built landmarks like Malayan, the Botanic Gardens, Changi Airport Control Tower, they have become very iconic and and symbolic for Singaporeans.
Yeah, and could you just sort of give us a few more names then of ones that really sort of stood out that people were, of the 50, the ones that people seem to resonate most with?
I think, so I mentioned Botanic Garden, Changi Airport, and so on. I think the other one is Singapore Art Museum, which interestingly, the older respondents will remember it as St. Joseph Institution, right? But for the older respondents, they actually did not actually say that it's very important or they have a lot of memories about it. But for the younger respondents, because they remember that particular site as Singapore Art Museum, it actually featured quite prominently.
I think it makes a difference too that they still have access to these buildings. You know, it's not blocked off to the public. But I was wondering, because there was an interesting finding in the survey that said those that think heritage is an important thing, very valuable to us, they're also the ones that are most nationalistic, have a high level of national identity. Tell us more about that.
I think, in the survey, we asked people a series of questions that would measure how they see heritage as important for them in Singapore. So if they say that heritage is important to me, you know, and they are more likely to actually express a stronger sense of national identity. So I think if you think about what that measure is, it involves actually being in the built environment, making sense of what's around them, and also actually ascribing a sense of meaning to these sites.
Very
so
true.
And
thank you so
pride
much.
in your home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for coming by. We've been speaking with Natalie Pang. She's from the IPS Social Lab, a Senior Research Fellow there, telling us more.